Ne-am întors cu ambasadorul Tunisiei la București, o doamnă elegantă, extrem de bine pregătită, inteligentă, simpatică și cu care discutăm subiecte cât se poate de grele, dar într-un mod relaxat, pentru că este totuși sâmbătă seara și vrem ca și dumneavoastră și noi să ne bucurăm de lucrurile pe care le aflăm, chiar dacă unele dintre ele nu sunt foarte vesele. Din păcate, în zona respectivă se mai întâmplă și lucruri care nu sunt neapărat cele mai îmbucurătoare în acest moment. Ms. Ambassador, let's go back to our discussion about the role of the civil society in putting all these political players together in Tunisia and making them not go with the country in chaos like happened. I mean, we don't offend anyone because we had the Egyptian ambassador, we had the Libyan ambassador here on that chair, so we don't offend by saying that it happened in Egypt, for example, where we had the democratic leader coming and getting more than the predecessor, more power and more, let's say, more dictatorship powers than the predecessor. So that's why the role of the civil society here, I find it fantastic, because what you describe is a group of, I don't know, unions and employers, which are the most important.
And it is unique even in Tunisia's contemporary history, because
it's unique everywhere. I mean, even in Europe, I don't remember. I mean, civil society is strong, but to be the one that facilitated, let's say, the common understanding of the political parties over the democratic process, it's quite new.
Civil society grew very fast in the years after the revolution, because before the revolution it was there. The Tunisian League for Human Rights had a role, but it was stifled. It was, of course, not able to fulfill its role properly.
Of course.
Not the Tunisian League of Human Rights, but their voices would rise and they would stand steadfast for what they deemed was the right direction for the country to take, and to condemn the repression when it happened. But their voices were not as outspoken as they became after the revolution, of course.
And the role of the civil society, of the Quartet, was ending at the when they put everybody at the table and the parties were like understanding what is their role. Were they out, or they
participated in the discussions to draw a roadmap. The roadmap would enable Tunisia to go forward and to take us to what we deem the shore of safety, over the brink, over the chasm, the gaps that separated every party. You have to consider that we are in Tunisia, and all the parties in presence in Tunisia, in a learning process of democracy, of how to give and take, of not to be always in the winning position. And that's what happened. People were entrenched in their position and not wanting to relinquish anything of what they thought was the advanced position they had. And so it was a learning process. And I think what enabled the civil society, the four organizations, and political parties and movements to overcome the obstacle was, I think, a common desire to save the country.
Mr. Ambassador, what I found extraordinary here is, of course, by far the role that the civil society represented by the four categories is not only that they facilitated the process and created awareness and put the parties together and made them understand that how they should function and so on. I found extraordinary something else. They had the power to govern, but they didn't. From what I understand, the Quartet did not want it to be the government.
I don't think there was a question for them to be in the governing seats.
Well, unfortunately, in some countries becomes a purpose for civil society to start governing, but it doesn't matter. I mean, in this case, it was a fantastic desire for them just to put the country on the right track and to leave democracy, which is this is how democracy functions.
Really,
political parties are governing, not civil society.
Exactly, and they were clear in the role they would undertake.
Yes.
That it was a role of putting people together in order for us to have a constitution. Because remember, we were in the middle of drafting a constitution for the country, and for preparing the country for elections, and for ending the transitional process, to get us out of that small neck. So that was why. Because the situation could not tolerate, the economy needed recovery. We needed to go past the crisis to where we could discuss the real problems of the country.
Yes.
How to address the creation of jobs for young people. People were waiting for
solutions,
for civil society, for solutions.
Yes.
Because why did the revolution take place?
Exactly.
Because there were a great proportion of young people with diplomas, with no prospects, with no future.
Absolutely.
How long can they wait? So everybody had in their thoughts that this situation could not wait any longer. As the generation that was in charge of either the workers or the employers, or they had this feeling of urgency.
Yes.
That something had to be done, and they had to step up and ensure that things were done in order to get all the parties and people in presence closer. And I remember a sentence that one of the organizers said, which really stuck to my mind. I remember him saying to the media, we know that, okay, we could go to civil conflict, we could go to tearing each other apart, but in the end, we'd have to come round to the table. So let's do it now.
Correct. Well, it was very
nice. And I thought there was a lot of wisdom in the démarche in itself, to be able to help your country. Who else is going to do it? And you have also to note that Tunisians did not wait for the outside world to come and tell them.
That's the interesting.
To draw a roadmap towards recovery, political recovery over a crisis, or how to. So
or not the Western countries putting these people together. They decided to put together themselves.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
Because usually, you know, what happens after some such revolutions, wherever in the world, sometimes foreign persons or governments.
We called on the help and the aid of course, the outside world, whether it be the United Nations organization itself. It was one of the first to come to Tunisia, or our usual traditional partners, for us to say, we are here, we are deciding, we are determining our own future, and we are in a situation where we need the help. It was mainly economic. It was mainly to say, here are our intentions. We want to build a democracy. And of course, we cannot go it alone if we cannot have also economic recovery.
Absolutely.
If we do not have the economic solutions, if we do not have the investment from our partner countries, whether in Europe or the Arab world or the United States or Asia, and Tunisia has friends everywhere.
Well, you were for centuries that, you know, the northern were one of the the northern parts of Africa, and your ports were visited by everybody.
We are a small country, but we have big ambitions. And we are very much attached since independence to international equality, to respecting other people's, other nations' way of determining their future. Also.
Coming back to the quartet, I find it extraordinary. And my question was not referring to what the country wanted, was referring more to how these people decided to form such a coalition, and how they decided to assume that, okay, now is the moment. They risked as well here, because the risk was there. And what I understood from you is that not businessmen from America funded them to put themselves together. as it happened in Romania in some years, or an international organization where different countries decided that. No, it was an internal decision of these organizations.
Well, it came out of this awareness that they had, and because they are old institutions, they were there for a very long
time.
Were
not created...
no, they were not created out of the void, out of the blue, not at all.
Fantastic.
They were already there, and they were warning of the dire consequences of this paralysis in political life.
Yes.
And from that stage, they took it upon themselves to have a more active role.
And now, what is their role? Is their role of monitoring, or...?
Yes, there was a temptation to institutionalize.
Oh, it's always a temptation.
The national dialogue. Not to govern, but as a safeguard, as a... but it was deemed, and they themselves expressed that they would go back to their traditional roles.
Yes,
of
Ambassador,
trade union.
If you institutionalize such a body, you destroy it.
Yeah, but you have other safeguards. You have the Constitution is in
there.
itself. Yeah. The institutions of the Second Republic are deemed as the main safeguard. But we can always go back to whenever needed.
Of course.
It can be another format of dialogue.
Absolutely.
Why have the same people? I mean, civil society is very rich in Tunisia, and now the learning process is very much advanced. There was the temptation. People called, like well-wishers, said, okay, this is a big success. Why don't we keep it? And the answer from the protagonists themselves was that they preferred to go back to their. They have a very important role to perform, as also the defender of the interests of the workers in the case of the Union Générale des Travailleurs Tunisiens, and it is ensuring that role in a very strong way. As the Chika, they have now an ongoing dialogue. So they were they were allies to bring to reduce the chasm, to reduce the gap. Now they are back to their traditional roles. Absolutely. And they have an ongoing negotiation, very tough, about the salaries of the workers in the private sector.
I wanted to discuss with you a lot about this Nobel Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, not only because you are, of course, proud of it, because you are a Tunisian, but also because I am proud of it. I am part of the civil society, and of course, it's difficult for me not to jump with different subjective attitudes. But I find what these people did fantastic, because Romania, after 25 years, didn't manage to have such a. It has a strong civil society, but it didn't manage to have from inside. From inside, such organizations able to play such a role. It was more coming from the Western side, the pressure or the funding or different interests, and the internal civil society more was aligned to what was needed. So that's why I really appreciate what they did, because they played a key role, but they didn't want to keep the power.
No. There was no question.
They would withdraw.
Yeah, we withdraw to our natural roles.
Fantastic.
Because in their respective roles, they have also a role to play, whether it's the president of the League for Human Rights, they still have problems to tackle, and they had a role in discussing the draft of the constitution. They have also...
They didn't become ministers.
No, I can assure you.
Well, anyway, I find this extremely important for the people to know. And for your country, it's a big plus comparing with the other revolutions that took place around you, and actually in the Middle East as well. You are a success model from this point of view. Well,
I hope we are, and we continue to be. Because for us, the progress is going on. And the last, I can give you an example of what was passed not long ago. A law was voted in Parliament to institute a constitutional court in Tunisia. It's a first also, which will have to determine the constitutionality of the law in Tunisia. So for us, that's another milestone down the road to ensure that democracy and law and order.
I will also make, Ms. Ambassador, a little of comparison for 30 seconds. This was such an interesting subject for me, because I wanted to hear from you, I think, again, about what was happening in Tunisia with the role of these important organizations, employers, unions, lawyers organizations, and human rights activists, because we started to create here something which I would never dare to put it in the same basket with your quartet. But we do have a coalition which is called the Coalition for a Modern Romania, which is formed by the most important employers, like the National Chamber of Commerce, the most important unions, the most important NGOs who are relevant in our view. It doesn't matter. It's more or less the same kind of mixture. And what we try to do is to pressure government to accept a roadmap and negotiate. We had a meeting, for example, today with the Minister of Education regarding education and the priorities. But it's always existing the tendency, and this is what I appreciated very much to your example, and we try to follow the same example, to be convinced by political parties or be convinced by someone to go in the government, to be in the government. And the problem is, if the civil society goes in the government, who's monitoring the government? If the political parties. So that's why I hope that our coalition will also resist. It will be as strong as your extraordinary example you
we
gave.
had instances when people but very rare, when we had at some point somebody from civil society exceeding, a ministerial post. I remember in one of the transitional, there was a young person that was called upon to be a minister in the field of the youth and the new technologies. We have now a young person as a minister. She's a lady taking in charge the question of how to make the compensations for people who were injured during the revolution, and she has a role in relating to all the victims of what happened during the revolution. And you can have people in a governmental post just to be a correspondent to civil society, and because they come from civil society, they know what the needs are, but only in a role where they can relate.
Yes, very, very simple role and very limited.
Well, very important too.
Yes, very important.
And also to take from that reservoir of young people, especially, who have energy, who have a vision for their country. Yes. And also you cannot have only the older generation. You have to appeal.
Well, that is true. That is true. But my vision is not to reinvent democracy and to reform the parties, not to replace them with something else. Let me ask you another question, which is interesting for me. You personally, but do you feel, and the Tunisians in general, more European or more African?
Wow, what a question. How do I feel? I feel I am the product of my upbringing, of my education, I feel many things at the same time. I learned to speak foreign languages when I was very young, when I went to school, 6 years old, French and then English. Yes. I feel very much at ease in my Arab character. My name is very much Arabic.
Yeah, well, yes.
Boutheina. My dad loves poetry, and that's why he chose that name for me, from the poet Jamil Boutheina. Also, we feel Mediterranean, very much involved in what happens in the southern shores and the northern shores. And we feel all this, we have different parts of our identity. We don't want to choose either to be confined in one little space. And during the discussion of the draft of the Constitution, it was a very lively debate. How do we define ourselves? Yes. Well, we chose a conservative option, saying that we are, of course, Arabs, Muslims, but some felt that, hey, but what about Mediterranean? What about African? What about, okay, that was too much maybe to put in one article, but that's how we feel. We are, of course, Arab and Muslim, and all the rest, African, Mediterranean, close to Europe. Why choose?
You are similar with Morocco and other countries which are very close to Europe and in the middle of civilizations.
Yeah, because your parents tell you when they were young, they had Italian neighbors.
Yes, exactly.
So it's in you. You have it. You have that heritage of. When we were little, we used to watch Arabic TV, Italian TV. We learned Italian just watching television.
Yes.
When you go to the souks of Tunis, to the traditional Medina, everybody speaks languages: Italian, German, French, you name it. I went somewhere where I bought a nice traditional cloth, and I said I was living in Romania, and this was to show my Romanian friends.
Yes.
And the vendor said, "Oh, Romanians, oh, it's such nostalgia."
Really?
Yeah, he said, "Oh, they don't come now much, but it's nice and to be with them, and they are fun-loving, and even when they don't buy anything from you."
Well, but we try to buy, but maybe next time.
If I help show you also.
Yes. We will take another short break of commercial news, Ambassador, and we will come back with all of the subjects are serious, but to come back a little bit to describe the Jasmine Revolution and how did you felt it, how the Tunisians felt it, and how was the transition a little bit from the old system to the new system. Publicitate.